Well, good evening to all the colleagues who are joining the page at this time. Welcome once again to the Phase A conferences. As you can see, today we have a very interesting topic. Today we are going to talk about how the psychological and physiological aspects of the physical body are structured. We are going to discuss this topic, which is very important in order to truly begin making progress in inner work. Well, let's greet Margarita, who is with us, and also Angelica on Facebook. We also see, there are colleagues who don't appear here in the comments. So greetings to them as well. I recommend watching the first lecture of the syllabus. The link is down below. So you can clearly understand what self-knowledge is and its objectives. And join us if you choose here on Tuesdays and Fridays for Phase A lectures. On Saturdays, there are Phase B lectures. On Sunday, there's a reflection. And at night, there's a practice session. And also, if you want to join us for some of the public practice sessions, not all of them, but some, you can do that as well. Everything is free of charge. Absolutely nothing is charged here. This is knowledge that is shared as a sacrifice for humanity. The aim is to help humanity by providing these tools so that if people decide to work on themselves, then they can make progress in their own inner development. Well, Pepe has also joined this broadcast, and Consuelo is here on YouTube as well. All right, let's begin the conference tonight. We're starting with the agenda, but first, if you could confirm the audio for me, if there's any issue, while we'll improve it a bit before we start. It seems to be fine. Also, Hector has joined the broadcast here. Join us on Facebook too. And Hamilton is here as well. All right. Angelica is telling us that the sound is good. Perfect. Very well. So we're ready. Tonight's topic, conference number 4 of Phase A, is titled The 7 Centers of the Human Machine. Here we see in the background the centers in the spinal column and in the pineal and pituitary glands at the top of the brain. And we see a terrible turbulence which represents the state of psychology. We have come, or rather we must understand that we are terribly unbalanced, which is the objective of this conference. And how to balance the centers in order to get out of that state of lack of control, inner disorder on the mental, emotional, instinctive, sexual, and motor levels. But, let's get into the subject. Let's see how these centers work, what their function is, and how we are going to organize them, okay? When we talk about a center, we're actually referring to something that acts somewhat as a kind of force in a system. A center is essentially a concentration of energy that exists within a particular context. So let's look at the centers. Here at the bottom you find the sexual center. And the function of this sexual center is to create. So we have 3 ways to create with sex. One is suprasex, which is the knowledge of higher beings. It's a type of sex practiced by races that have awakened consciousness, very advanced, intelligent, races from outer space. Outside of this planet, generally only this type of sex is practiced, although some races complement it with normal sex. So suprasex is a practice where, well, as we've already discussed, sexual energy is not lost, but rather regenerated with that same energy. Normal sex is for reproducing the species, but without fornicating. In other words, only one sperm is released, and it joins with the egg to reproduce the species. But semen is not lost. The sexual energy is not taken out of the body. And infrasex, well, is what all of humanity practices. And so, in this way, the animal ego, the eyes have been created and made to grow. This center manages sexual energy. It is closely related to laziness and to the sense of touch, right? All right. A little higher up, we have the instinctive center. Its location is in the sacral bone. And this center is the one that generates vitality, that manages the body's vitality. The function of this center is to apprehend, right? In other words, here is stored the memory of all the actions that have been performed, right? This center is in charge of managing everything related to the waters. There is an instinctive, autonomous part that we do not control for now. Later on, when the being reaches the second mountain, this will be able to be managed freely. But we do not control all the vital functions of the body. Hormonal is the respiratory, cardiac, intestinal, system, nervous. We do not control any of this. This is managed in an autonomous, automatic, mechanical way, right? This center is in charge of managing the health of the physical body. That is why it is called vitality. If the physical body gets sick, it is because the vital body is sick. So we must understand that karma is found there. That is where cell reproduction takes place. The vitality itself of a person, their age, right? If a person mastered this center, had full and total control over this center, then they would not age. But for now, we have to do some work, and the goal is to reach that point. All right? The ego is very highly developed in an instinctive way, and we need to observe the entire instinctive part, how the eyes move. Right now, we are interested in looking at instinct on a psychological level. And we need to understand that this center is terribly infested with larvae. So here in this center, everything related to desire is at play, which later logically connects with the emotional center, right? And this center controls the sense of taste. Remember that every desire is greed. So all the instincts of this body, for example, a person has instincts of anger, of fear. For example, the body trembles. All the pleasurable sensations of the body are the manifestation of the self, of the larva, in the physical body, right? So the pleasure of the physical body comes from the vital body. Lust produces intense, truly intense vibrations, tensions, sensations in the body. So we need to look at how the instinctive center is structured on a psychological level in order to control eliminate, destroy all this swarm of larvae that is there. These larvae gnaw away at and consume the vital energy. And that's why a person's life is very short. It deteriorates very quickly. They damage the vital body with drugs, alcohol. They harm it in many ways. And that's why the person lives with vital deficiencies and suffers from many illnesses, right? They have no defenses. We have the lower emotional center, which is located at the level of the navel, but over the spinal column, right? It is responsible for feeling emotions, both positive and negative, of the self. And this center logically should have a higher active aspect, but it does not. Right now, our entire emotional part is driven by this type of emotions, which leave it very unbalanced. Negative emotions give rise to pleasure, pain, resentment, hatred, grudge, right? Also, with this center, a person falls in love through the various pleasures and joys that lust generates. So, this type of emotions throws this center out of balance. This fire, this center produces the fire, the drive, right? And that drive is focused precisely on that, on satisfying pleasure. The energy that this center manages is emotional and is closely related to the sense of smell and to lust. All right, the lower intellectual center is a little higher up at the level of the heart, but along the spine, and it too is in a state of imbalance due to thoughts, beliefs, and ideologies. The function, the means of this center is to reflect, to think. Thinking logically from the point of view of the I is the involutive state of the center, but one must activate the higher part of this center through logically inner work. All right? When a person is going to do anything, they first imagine it, they plan it. That's why thoughts from this point of view are the origin of actions. When a person thinks, comes up with something, if they are driven by the I, then they carry it out physically, right? So we have to understand that the center or the centers are invaded by the eyes, right? All right, when a person thinks, they create, they start to create, right? And the quality of the thoughts determines the quality of the actions. So there you have the negative thoughts of the I, and logically, if a person lets themselves be carried away entirely by intellectualism, then they can't listen to the wisdom of the heart on an intuitive level. Mental energy governs this center. The sense related to it is hearing, and also the defect that has this center as its epicenter is pride. All right, let's move on to the fifth center, the motor center. This motor center is in charge of everything related to movement. It is responsible for all actions and words. At this moment, logically, it is mechanical. It is controlled by the psychological I. People seem like or are zombies. And this center is responsible for perfecting on the higher side any mechanical learning where thought does not participate, right? Because if a person is driving a car, an automobile, they can't think, because if they think, it blocks the motor center, right? If they're walking, they don't think about walking. The motor center does that automatically. If something is thrown at their face, the motor center automatically closes the eyes in an instinctive motor way to protect the vision from any or substance or something that falls or comes toward the face, right? It is located at the level of the larynx, over the spinal column. Its function is, to use speech, right? The leftovers and the omissions. All the actions of the body are moved by the motor center. The sense here is sight, and the defect is anger. This is where the epicenter of anger, of violence, is found. This center, as we mentioned, we find it at the seventh cervical vertebra. Specifically, we find it at the very top, right? Let's move on to the other two centers that are not unbalanced, which are superior. And as long as a person does not work on psychological death, these two centers do not become active. Therefore, people who are fornicating, people who are not interested in knowledge, ordinary people, these two centers are completely isolated. We have the superior emotional center. It is located in the pituitary gland or hypophysis. This center has the function of judging. With this center, we are going to self-observe the eyes. And it also has the ability to measure the consequences of actions. This center is intimately connected directly with the consciousness. Here, the epicenter of beyond the eyes of this center, such as the eye, of course, is gluttony. All right, and the other center, which is the superior intellectual center, is located in the pineal gland. And that is where the wisdom of the Father is found. There, the force of the pure spirit moves. As the eye, of course, in that center, envy is present. And the sense that this center manages is polyvision. All right, it's important to understand that all the centers, these 5 lower centers, are unbalanced. And the person must balance them. Now, what does it mean that they are unbalanced? It means that they are fornicating all the time. Absolutely all the time, these centers are fornicating every single day. When a person starts their day, they are filled with energy. Remember that at night, a person gets sleepy. And during that sleep, the person recharges with energy, right? The instinctive center is responsible for distributing that energy to the other centers. And the surplus is stored in the sexual center, right? So the person gets up in the morning and starts spending their energy. They use it up with thoughts at work, with movements. They use it up with negative emotions. All day long they are spending in throwing away, wasting their energy. Then at night they have sex with their partner or with their girlfriend or boyfriend, and they end up completely draining the body, leaving it dry with nothing, absolutely no energy left. And that energy gets used up every day. It gets recharged. It gets spent. The body keeps deteriorating until one day it just doesn't work anymore. It's like a cell phone. It has its useful life. And once that useful life is over, you have to replace it. The battery no longer holds a charge. It has a lot of issues with the slowness. It's already aged, it's already deteriorated, and that's what happens with the physical body. So if a person starts to save their energy, they revitalize the body, rejuvenate it a bit, and keep it in better condition, right? So we have that in the mind. There are intellectual eyes, thoughts, memories, ideas, conversations, concepts, beliefs. and people keep putting information into their heads every day, taking information from books, from the internet, from videos. They keep putting in more and more and more junk into their heads, filling their heads with more intellect, and they never stop thinking, never stop imagining. So under those circumstances, how do you expect to save mental energy? In the motor center, words, the person loses a lot of energy through words, through conversations, through gossip, through slander, also through the actions of the body, right? They abuse the movement of the body. So they are unbalanced because they are fornicating, right? We have the emotional center, emotions of all kinds, positive and negative, completely throw this center out of balance. Hatred, resentment, contempt, arrogance, and crying, sadness, melancholy, depression, bohemianism. All these emotions wear out this center, instinctive center. All the sensations of the body, vibration, tension, muscular contraction, carnal burning, sensations on the skin, vibrations, electric shocks, chills, heat from a psychological point of view, right? All of this wears out the instinctive center. And logically, the sexual center with ejaculation and orgasm. So we need to look at how we are going to balance these centers. To balance these centers, we must use as a primary basis the death in motion and reflective death. Death in motion consists of killing the egos, maintaining control over the centers, como keeping the centers still. That's why it's called psychological death, because the person must die. In other words, kill the activity of the centers. So you are going to strive to keep, if you want to work on death itself, the mind in silence. Applying death in self-remembering. Consciousness does not need to think. The habit of thinking belongs to the ego. And in this way, you save mental energy, keeping the emotional center still. If that center is activated, you kill whatever activates that center. Because only when the centers are dead or begin to die, does the higher part of the center become active. But the difference between the higher part of the center, that is the solar part, and the lower part of the center is that the solar part does not cause wear and tear. Why? Because the centers would be guided by intuition. Then you become incredibly perceptive and understanding. So they draw knowledge directly from the phenomena of nature, but they do not fornicate, they do not wear themselves out. So the two higher ones have not fallen, the five lower ones have fallen and are unbalanced. So through ongoing death, all the centers become balanced. And when the centers become balanced, energy will be produced, it will be purified, it will be conserved in order to create the higher existential bodies of the being, right? So if the person does not learn to self-observe, to look at their eyes, then in no way will they be able to balance those centers to maintain total control of the centers. And this is done by maintaining that self-remembering, that inner silence, that calm, that tranquility, that peace, that harmony with which a person should be living every day. A person who is worried, anxious, stressed, tense, angry is a terribly devolutive element, does not know how to live, is killing themselves. They do not control their lower instincts, their base emotions, their tortuous thoughts that cause them pain and problems. So this is a terribly weak person who if they decide to work on themselves, can change all of this and live in a higher way, saving energy. When a person is working on themselves, they achieve right thinking, right feeling, right action, and right speech. This is directed by the consciousness. But if the person is not working on death, they will not have mental, emotional, motor, instinctive, or sexual balance. So the balance of the centers is fundamental every day. This is a daily practice, right? So that is the work to balance these centers. Now with a partner, matam everything, the death of the egos that give a lot of energy is released, and that energy is ready to be transmuted, right? But if the person is not dying, even if they have a partner and practice transmutation, it won't help them because there is no energy with which to transmute. So we have to balance a birth with ongoing death throughout the day, and logically with reflective death. It is through death that we are going to achieve progress, development, and change, both physically and psychologically. Transformation happens gradually. What happens is that this is not fast because there are millions and millions of details of egos that need to be killed. So you have to be very patient, but the changes become visible and happen gradually. So that is the objective of this lecture. It is to save that energy, to purify it, prepare it, or create it in order to use it in the creation of the higher existential bodies of the being. Yes, we must start practicing mana in an intense way. Every day, the foundation of this knowledge about death. Death is what allows a person to awaken, progress, understand, improve all their capacities, mental, emotional, and instinctive. They regain sexual potency and, well, can begin to do the work as it should be done. Well, that's all for tonight's lecture. For the next lecture, next Friday, we are going to cover a very interesting topic called the dimensions and where they are within us. It's a topic that shows us that there are dimensions and that we can inhabit these dimensions just as beings with awakened consciousness do. The bodies are going to be created precisely to be able to extract all the knowledge, to have all the information from these dimensions, to develop ourselves as higher beings, and to know that these dimensions are, well, the 7 basic dimensions of nature. We are going to see how one can enter these dimensions consciously and be able to conduct investigations within them. So keep this in mind. The dimensions exist outside in nature, and logically they also exist inside us on a psychological level. Well, we are going to answer some questions and then we will conclude this topic for tonight. All right, there are some other colleagues who have joined us here. I'd like to greet Hamilton here. And, well, Pablo over here, Guerrero, Alirio, Angela, Eucharis, Veronica, David, also Eneris. Elisa is with us as well. Jose Ramirez, Hector, and of course, those who haven't appeared in the comments as well. All right, Hector says here, Luis, is it normal that even with this knowledge, despite transmuting with your partner or sublimating, the sexual center sometimes gets activated at dawn? Well, there is a charge that reaches the sexual area where it concentrates, and this center does sometimes get activated, but not in a lustful way. Rather, it's simply a natural process that happens due to the movement of energy, you know? So there's nothing dangerous there that would cause you to have a nocturnal emission or anything like that. No, it's a natural process of the body. For now, right? Mechanic. But it's not something that poses any kind of risk or anything like that. Hamilton. Now, Luis, when one asks for the death of an ego, does one necessarily have to imagine that it dies in the place where that center is located? Yes, you have to use imagination, concentration, and willpower. That's right. When you ask for death, it's willpower. Imagination is used when you destroy the ego, when you burn the ego, and logically, you focus your attention on what you're doing. So those three forces are present there. Well, here Julio says, good evening. With the chakras, can those centers also be lightened? No. Let's not get involved with the chakras, because the chakras are centers or magnetic discs that work in unison with the nervous system and the instinctive center. The function of these chakras is to distribute and accumulate energy, but these chakras are managed when a person awakens the churches, as we have seen in the lecture on the 7 chakras and the 7 churches. A person who wants to awaken chakras and get involved with all of this is someone who wants to become a sorcerer. So it's the sorcerers who develop that, the black magicians, right? The white magician waits for the being to grant him that ability when the time is right. And when the chakra is awakened, it is on the white path, not the black path. Right now, the interest of all the egos is to have psychic powers. And those psychic powers are for doing things and satisfying the egos in certain ways. In the name of love, in the name of medicine, in the name of consciousness and all that. Those are wanderings of the mind, which deep down the element wants to awaken in evil. So if the churches awaken first, there is wisdom to manage those chakras. But if the churches do not awaken, then the egos take those powers and the person degenerates even more. Well, here Carlos, here Pepe also asks us, can you talk a bit more about what the 2 higher centers are, Luis? Yes. We have the higher emotional center, which is the center that allows us to judge the egos. This center also possesses higher clairvoyance, which is self-observation. Without this center, no one can self-observe the egos. It is intimately connected with the divine soul, with justice, or with measuring the consequences of actions. Those kinds of abilities are found in this center, right? And the higher intellectual center is where you will store all the information given to you by the being. All the knowledge you gain from the dead egos remains in this center. And when you are going to talk about a certain topic on, for example, the masturbator ego, the pornography ego, the suicidal ego, the depression ego, immediately on an intuitive level, the information comes out from this center, and that information comes from death. That wisdom remained, it stayed in that center because of the death of these egos. That knowledge is intuitive. So if you have killed the pornography ego, you have knowledge about that ego, and that information remains in the superior intellectual center. Also, if the Father gives you an experience, if he shows you a past existence, or shows you things that are inside the earth, shows you things out there that exist in the solar system, shows you things about medicine, shows you biological knowledge about nature, all that information is recorded in that center. So when you need any of that information, it simply comes out in an intuitive way. It connects to what you are talking about. You are linked to that center. And when you need that information, it comes to your mind without having to stress or search for it? No. This happens by association? No. And you can teach things that the being has taught you in order to improve understanding and to be able to provide higher quality knowledge. So all that knowledge remains there, just as you have in the lower mind. All that pile of junk you picked up from universities, schools, the internet, books, institutions, theories, well, all those beliefs, assumptions, lies from everywhere. That's how it is. It's overrun. That's the lower intellectual center. But the other center, the higher one, is not like that. There, none of that exists. There, what you find is true wisdom, not falsehoods and lies and all these assumptions and concepts that everyone has in their heads. Well, here Pepe also asks us, is it true that with the dervish dance, the chakras in the knees are opened because of the spinning? There are many concepts about that. The purpose of these dances is to balance the centers, that is, to quiet them for a few seconds, while a practice is performed and to help focus better on that practice. That is the objective. But since the mind is so volatile and so mystical, and it connects things in a way that mixes everything together, these kinds of concepts come up. But no. It would be good for you to look into what a dervish dance is, for example, when they are spinning. When they are doing that practice, if you investigate it astrally, you will see that it is a very good practice for momentarily balancing the centers, because you have to be completely focused during those practices. And that concentration allows the person to enter into consciousness, right? And that's precisely what it's for. So that when you're about to enter an astral projection, a meditation, a practice of suprasex, and you've done about 5 minutes of dervish spinning, you'll be much more prepared for that practice to work well. Alirio, what is the step that one must take to awaken the first church? I suppose that happens after chastity or the closing of the sphincters. Thank you. No. The closing of the sphincters is done in the second initiation, and the passage through the churches begins, from the first initiation, right? Of course, you must already have a level of chastity. The fire must have been awakened, and the fire must have already risen up the spine. And there, as it rises up the spine, the churches are awakened. In the first initiation, of course, the knowledge of those churches is very basic, very basic. Then in the second initiation, it is deeper. In the third, it is much deeper. And the true, let's say, extracting all the information from those churches happens, logically, when the work is completed. Second mountain, that's when you fully enter the churches, right? Well, Angela, here Mr. Lewis asks a question. Why does a person lose this sense of self-observation? Because they didn't use it, or rather they stopped using it. Then it's been centuries since we stopped using this sense, it's atrophied. Now with knowledge, we have the opportunity to reactivate this sense, and this sense is what allows us to see our inner world. The egos. This sense is fundamental for the work of death, isn't it? Well, it seems there are no more concerns, no more questions. Well, thank you all very much for attending, for participating, for asking questions. I hope this lecture has been helpful to you, and that we understand the need to keep those centers under control. People really live very poorly. A person doesn't realize how much energy they lose with outbursts of anger, fear, anxiety, despair, anguish, pain, sadness, melancholy, crying, being in that state of restlessness, uncertainty, stress, all kinds of fear of what others will say, what they will think, worries. It's terrible. The human race doesn't know how to live. It suffers and suffers and suffers, but it also doesn't want to stop suffering. So, people are given the option to apply death and achieve a sense of balance, but this is optional. And well, those of us who want to, we are fighting to learn how to live decently with a balanced mind, balanced emotions, and balanced instincts. If you don't work on the sensations of the body, if you don't work on the pleasure that is sought through the practice of infrasex, all that lust eating away at your intestines, when you become sexually aroused, all these larvae become active and they start consuming your sight, nervous system, flesh, skin, because you don't want to kill those sensations that produce so much pleasure. And people are used to the vice of pleasure, so they will continue to deteriorate, they will grow old, their organs will wear out, and one day they will die. And they did nothing. They achieved nothing. And, well, everyone dies with their vices. And pleasure is a terrible vice. Well, there are many types of pleasures, right? But they are all vices. So we must sacrifice pleasure, animal enjoyment, and focus on developing logically consciousness, which also has a higher form of enjoyment, but it has nothing to do with the animal pleasure we are used to, and which deteriorates and unbalances us all the time. Well, we'll stop here. Thank you all very much for participating. Have a pleasant rest of the night. Take care. Don't lose your strength and keep working diligently. Well, here's another question. Says, let's see. Freddie, I think it is. By going deeper, I discovered that the psychological trait in which the centers become unbalanced is formed or returns in a deteriorated brain. What can you say about that? I think it has to do with the type of man mentioned in the fourth way. Man number 1, 2, and 3, or motor instinctive, sexual, emotional, and intellectual. Thank you. Well, whether that's mentioned in a book or in one organization or another, let's not look at it so pragmatically. So let's look at it in ourselves. Because if we start talking based on other people's concepts, we're in trouble. Let's look at it within ourselves. The psychological trait is the psychological imprint. So a person comes with a marked design. Some have a number of egos pressing to be worked on because that's what marks them in this existence. You see that there are people who are very anxious, desperate, and they will be marked by that their whole lives. Others are irritable. Others are terribly lustful. I don't mean to say that none of us have lust, because we all do, but there are people who have that psychological trait very strongly because those egos are deeply imprinted in their mark, in their electropsychic design, right? Others are terribly lazy. Others are, well, each person has their own psychological traits. So this can't be generalized, because the problem with the intellect is wanting to see things in the concepts and ideologies of institutions, teachers or pseudo-teachers. And then a rigid mind is formed that if it's not through that system, then it can't see anything, it can't move forward. And it turns out that this is theoretical. It's pure intellect, because it doesn't observe within itself its own psychological trait, its own psychological imprint. Why does one have to speak according to someone else's guidelines? Here we are dealing with a knowledge where each person is going to get to know themselves, where there are laws that do establish the order of the mechanics of nature, but we have to go beyond those laws. We can't go on believing that we're going to achieve self-realization through mechanics alone. We have to be spontaneous, free. We have to see within ourselves the path, the line that the being marks out. But when someone is boxed in by the guidelines of this school or that person or another, well, they're screwed, because they're trapped in a mechanical line. If it worked for so-and-so or for someone else, that's fine. If it serves as a source of inspiration to help us move forward, to be able to see the path, that's fine. But following it to the letter is a very serious mistake. And defending that kind of approach, well, I don't think that's right. Instead, let's start observing our own psychology. And there we will truly discover the line of being in an independent and individual way, as it should be. That's why this knowledge is highly revolutionary. We don't rely on strict alignments. Do we have a guide? Yes, as reference points, but that's all. Each person walks their own path. All right, that's it. I think there's nothing more. Carlos says, can you pay off the karma for killing a defect? Well, every defect has its karma. You have to pay it. And you have to help humanity in order to produce dharma and pay off the karma. All right, that's it. We'll stop here. So have a pleasant rest of the night. Don't lose your strength. Keep working diligently, and ask your being to help you, to show you, to give to you,